Welcome to the News9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. It was the worst attack on a passenger airliner before the 9/11 attacks. 329 airline passengers, a majority of them Indian origin, were murdered as they were flying over the Atlantic. But 38 years later, history seems to be repeating itself, at least the circumstances around what happened in 1985. We decided to talk about the Kanishka bombing because Canada has once again become a hotbed of Khalistani separatism. Terrorists based in Canada have openly threatened Air India and Indian diplomats working in Canada and the UK. Now, joining me in the studio today is Sanjay Lazar, who lost his entire family in the Kanishka bombing. Sanjay, thank you for joining us on the News9 Plus show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm also joined by my colleagues Anthony Rosario and Deepak Badana. Anthony produced this fine documentary on the bombing of Kanishka. But Sanjay, I want to start by asking you, nearly 4 decades after that bombing of Kanishka, have you been able to get closure on that story, on that case?
Well, first of all, thank you again for having me. No, there has been no closure. As you would know that, it's been a long series of miscalculated mishaps. The government of Canada in those days, had advance notice. There was a surveillance going on. They botched it.
Yes.
They had tape recordings. They erased it. So, this was a tragedy that should never have happened. After that, it took 20 years to get somebody to court. And then because of, mishandling of the case, death of witnesses and, discrediting evidence or just casting it aside, the murderers walked free. And now, after that, we had the John Major inquiry and a lot of recommendations came out of that, but still no justice. So, no, it's been 38 years and no closure. And, we are heading into the 40th anniversary in a year or two. It's terrible.
Yeah. So, Anthony, 38 years, no closure, as Sanjay just said. It's horrific, the kind of lapses that we saw in the documentary, that very fine documentary that you produced and of course Aditya reported. But you belong to that generation, Anthony, that was born after this bombing. What kind of a voyage of discovery was it for you when you went over all this, that, Sanjay's testimonies and of course the investigation reports where a bunch of Keystone cops seem to have been, investigating the terrorists before they bombed Kanishka?
First of all, Sandeep, thank you so much for having me on the show. I want to talk about the fact that, when I was growing up, when I was in school, I was and I'm still very fond of a show on Nat Geo called Air Crash Investigations.
Yes.
I watched a lot of it. Surprisingly, I've never heard about Kanishka before this.
Yeah.
It was only when we started discussing and only when I started reading about it, then did I learn what exactly happened. I think in our books also, we've never really, in our history books or in our contemporary history books, we've never read about it. And not only us Indians, it's also a Canadian tragedy. It's one of the biggest Canadian tragedies,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And there was a survey a couple of years back. And according to that survey in Canada, 9 out of 10 people haven't even heard about this. Now, mind you, all of this was planned in Canada.
Yeah.
The flights that were bombed, the bag which carried the bombs was sent from Canada.
Yes.
And from people who were in Canada. So it's very surprising that people in India, but not surprising that people in Canada don't know about it, because Canada has been all about suppressing information.
Yes.
First, not divulging information, then suppressing information. It's a major cover-up, right?
Right.
So I think while I'm surprised that Indians don't know it, I'm not surprised that Canadians don't know it, because the Canadian government has made every effort to suppress it over the last so many years.
Absolutely. And Sanjay, they had good reason to suppress this because of the kind of botched up investigation that was conducted after, and indeed the, leading up to this. Well, as someone who's lost his entire family in this botched up investigation and intelligence failure of the magnitude of possibly 9/11, where, I mean, let's not forget in 9/11, they didn't know that they were planning to fly, airliners into buildings. But here, they were on the tail of these bombers as bomb makers, as Sanjay pointed out. They were actually exploding these bombs and the investigators were following them and didn't have a clue. How angry are you, Sanjay, at this? And given the light that Khalistanis continue to be, active and preaching hatred even today.
That's the biggest tragedy. That I lost my entire family is a catastrophe, yes, of course. And we lost, 331 people in Tokyo and in Ireland on that day.
Yes.
Is a great, huge, it's still today the world's largest aviation, bombing.
Yes.
If you take any single aircraft. And what made it worse was, like you say, they tracked the guys, they watched them test fire a bomb, they had wiretaps, they had everything. It makes me wonder whether they had somebody inside that organization,
right,
and which is why they just, closed their eyes to what was happening. What is very significant, which I've mentioned, I think, to Anthony as well, was 15 days before this bombing took place, the US Secret Service visited the Parmar residence with the RCMP,
right,
because Rajiv Gandhi was coming to the US. So they already knew these guys were up to no good.
right.
And there is a tail of warnings which
Yeah.
the Indian government has issued 26 or 30 aid memoirs
Yeah.
to the Canadian government saying, listen, we know there's going to be a major attack on an
Right.
Indian installation.
Yeah.
So either it's the consulate or it's the State Bank of India or Air India. These are the three big things. So of course I'm angry. Of course, I feel these guys should have been in jail for life. I
Yeah.
feel we botched up the investigation. They could not prevent it, and they could not convict them.
Right.
That's the worst tragedy. And like Anthony says, yes, in India, unfortunately, when it happened, of course, Rajiv Gandhi did take it up. But after that, there has been no recognition of that, the magnitude of that disaster in India. And there are 4 memorials all across Canada, and not a single one in India. We have pandered or allowed the Khalistani radicals to get away with too much. And I hope that the Indian government takes cognizance of this right now, because you can see the Khalistanis are now getting bolder and bolder in Canada.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
control the narrative there.
Yes,
So
and
that's
I want to bring in
dangerous.
Deepak on this, because Deepak has been reporting and producing this fine series called Khalistan Reborn. Deepak, what Sanjay just mentioned, the fact that the Khalistanis are regrouping again in Canada and they're kind of openly preaching hatred, how worrisome is that, given the kind of terrorism, lone wolf attacks that we are seeing? How worrisome is that?
I mean, there's definitely a possibility. You have to see that for decades now, a culture has been sustained where these acts have been glorified. You see tableaus of assassinations
Of the Prime Minister,
of the Prime
Indira
Minister
Gandhi,
of
no
India,
less.
of a head of state.
Yes.
So those tableaus, and they're not going through some ghetto. They're going
Yeah.
through the boulevards of the big cities
Yes.
of Canada. Then you have the Canadian government. At one point, they look at this community as a vote bank that can be exploited. At another way, as Mr. Miluski points out,
Yes.
somehow they look at these people as lesser Canadians.
Yes.
So even if the 320 odd Canadians who died
right.
in the aircraft, even if they died, it didn't really bother them.
Yes.
It is worth asking, had it been white, Caucasian people in that flight,
Yes.
what would the response
That's a
have
very
been?
interesting point, Deepak, because just a few weeks back we did this story on 26/11, where we had none other than the former NSA, MK Narayanan, telling us that the Americans knew about the attacks, but they were very selective in the kind of intelligence they were giving us. And had we been given all the intel, we would have possibly averted the attacks, the most horrific terror attacks in terms of size, magnitude, and all of that. Sanjay, is there a kind of an apartheid when it comes to terror? White terror, terrorist attacks that affect white people vis-a-vis terrorist attacks that kill brown people?
I said this 20 years ago. I first said this at the first anniversary. And incidentally, Terry had interviewed me after the bombing,
Yes.
after the trial. And I told him, if this was a plane full of Caucasians, white men,
Yes.
the the killers would have been in jail within 1 year.
Right.
It's because we were all brown,
Yes.
and that is a glowing fact. Remember, Canada in the late 80s or the mid 80s was still a very white nation.
Yes.
The police, the RCMP, the CSIS, all had large numbers of Caucasians and very few Asians or Indians.
Yes.
Even when you go through the judgment of Justice Josephson, the reasons he gives for not accepting the testimony of Mrs. D and Mrs. E
Yes.
are so sketchy. It shows a complete lack of understanding of Indian culture, of Sikh culture, and it's shameful. It's yeah, there is apartheid. Yes, to put it in one word.
It's shameful, and I mean that's a new layer that we've kind of uncovered on this. But thank you very much for joining us, Sanjay, and we'll keep following this story up to ensure that we don't forget this ever, the bombing of Kanishka and the worst single terror attack on an aircraft. And thank you, Deepak, and thank you, Anthony, for that fine story. Of course, you can watch Anthony's story, Bombing Kanishka, only on the News9 Plus app. Download and watch.
I'm Sanjay Lazar. I lost my entire family in the Air India 182 Kanishka. This is, the story of my life. I failed my 12th standard, and that happened in June of 1985. And we were all to go on a holiday to Toronto, and I got my results 2 days before our departure, and they wanted to cancel that trip. The shock and horror of me failing upset my family no end. My dad didn't want to go. My stepmom didn't want to go. I said, no, please go. And I'll submit my papers for evaluation and I'll stay behind. It's only 10 or 12 days. It's not that I'm a 3-year-old child or something like that. My dad was obviously the in-flight supervisor. He worked in Air India for 24 years before that, and he was operating that flight along with a lot of friends, and they were all taking their families along.
Bollywood star Shreyas Talpade is one among a number of celebrities who've had heart attacks lately. Talpade fortunately survived, but many others were not so lucky. In fact, a large number of Indian males are now getting heart attacks at a very young age. And joining me to discuss this is eminent cardiologist Dr. Sanjeev Gera and my colleague Sridharan Ramakrishnan. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus show. Dr. Gera, I want to start by asking you, the Indian Heart Association, we're looking at some very disturbing facts here, that 50% of all attacks in Indian males occur under the age of 50 and 25% are under the age of 40. And this is only increasing, these numbers. They're just going, the patients are getting younger. What's the reason for this?
This is very true. Actually, the data is true. And when we talk about our emergency in Fortis Hospital, so around, you talk about 40 years of age, we are getting people with, in ages of 25 or 30 years of people coming to us with heart attacks. Young persons coming to us in emergency. And the main reason, actually, it has already scaled up, especially after COVID era,
Right.
when we were already stagnant. Actually, we were just lying and stuck up on our chairs or beds,
Yeah.
and we were not walking. We were just eating snacky food and junk
Right.
food. We were just ordering and doing every bad thing possible. Okay, so basically, it is not that young people are getting heart attack. The heart, and their chronological age is young, but their heart has becoming
Right.
getting aging and aging early, actually.
Right, but
And the reason for this is
you
our
connect it
lifestyle.
only to the COVID thing, the COVID blowback, the fact that we were all in homes, we weren't looking after ourselves.
COVID actually precipitated things, like if
Right.
someone who has got blockage of 50% or 40% because of his lifestyle, or maybe
Yeah.
because of genetics, because of smoking, early diabetes, early high blood pressure, obesity, so many risk factors are there for Indian population.
Yeah.
But the COVID precipitated it because there was inflammation in our blood. Inflammation means
Yes.
that blood got thicker,
Right.
and that caused the silent blockages to get ruptured and cause heart attack. So the
Right.
COVID was a trigger factor, but it is not the only factor responsible
Yes.
for early heart disease.
Right, right. Sri, we were just talking about this a little while earlier.
Right. So one question to you, Dr. Gera. Now the conventional wisdom says that if you're not above, let's say 50, you really don't need to go get a heart test or a heart checkup done, especially the invasive ones where they inject a dye into your blood and then they look at any blockages. So what would you advise youngsters to do? At what point do I know that I need a heart check?
Yeah.
So basically, like I said, we are getting like 22 or maybe within 30 years of age, we are getting so many of heart attacks. So I think there is no as such age criteria which I can lay down. But I think above 20 years of age is a good time to get yourself screened with at least with lipid profile, HbA1c, keep a check on your body mass index. But yes, if you have got a high heart age risk score, there is a risk scoring called through which we can calculate heart age, which actually takes into account so many risk factors like high blood pressure, what is your BP value, what is your sugar value, what is HbA1c level, have you got bad genetics, or if you're obese, if you're a sedentary worker, you are just stuck to your chair, you're not walking, you're smoking, alcohol, so much of fast food. If you have got all these risk factors, then I think there is no age criteria. You should get every year annual checkup, which must include a test called treadmill test, because ECG and echo, these tests only diagnose the already occurred disease. They can't diagnose silent heart disease. Treadmill test is very important. And if you have got diabetes or many risk factors, then I advise another test which is called CT calcium score. There is no need to inject dye, like you said. So it is just a procedure like CT scan of brain. It is just a CT scan of heart where it takes only 10 minutes, but we come to know about the calcium scoring of your heart. So if there is much of calcium in your arteries, this means there could be underlying silent blockages. So I think every person who has got those risk factors should get himself screened of every year with all these tests. Otherwise, I think above 25 years now should be the threshold level when we recommend preventive checkups.
25 years is the threshold. I mean, when did we think we would ever speak of a time when 25 would be a thing? It's horrifying, it's shocking. And as Dr. Gera says, to all of you out there, if you think you're above the age of 25 and you're at risk of any of these factors that he mentioned, please go and get yourself checked. But thank you very much, Dr. Gera, for this. And we'll keep coming back to you for news and updates on this. And you can watch this story of ours, The Heart Died Young, only on the News9 Plus app. Do download and watch.
Till 8 months ago, Dharmendra Kumar was one among thousands of Indian youth who complete college and dream of donning the uniform. He was high on optimism and preparing to take the CDS exam. At his home in Loni, Ghaziabad, his family members were aware of Dharam's passion for the uniform. Kumar wanted to emulate his father Ram Singh, a Naib Subedar with the CRPF posted in Ladakh.
अपने पिताजी से प्रेरित होकर जो CRPF में काम करते हैं और इन दिनों लद्दाख में पोस्टेड हैं, मैं भी फौज में जाना चाहता हूं।
But at 24, Kumar's dreams received a rude jolt.
पिछले साल मुझे कार्डियक प्रॉब्लम हुई थी और मुझे एंजियोप्लास्टी करवानी पड़ी।
On a cold Delhi December evening, he began complaining of persistent chest pain.
मेरे पास अचानक फ़ोन आया धर्मेंद्र का कि उसकी छाती में बहुत तेज़ दर्द हो रहा है और मैं तुरंत ही उसके घर पहुंचा, उसको अपनी मोटरसाइकिल पर तुरंत ही हॉस्पिटल ले गया और मुझे बहुत ही आश्चर्य कि इतने कम एज में उस तरीके से हार्ट अटैक हुआ है।
The first time I met Dharmender was under a very dire situation where he had suffered a massive heart attack. He was in extensive cardiogenic shock. Now we are proceeding for an angiogram. Let's check the blood pressure.
It was an evening that would change Dharmendra's life forever.
Here our prime motive was that his age is only 24, and we have to open up his artery as soon as possible. I immediately opened up the coronary artery, and his LED was opened up beautifully. He has an almost total recovery of heart function now.
अग्निवीर स्कीम ने मुझे एक दूसरा मौका दिया है जिससे मैं अपना सपना साकार कर सकूं.
If you thought heart attacks affect only celebrities in their 50s and 40s, think again.
Indians in general get heart disease at least 1 decade earlier than their Western counterparts. Also, the absolute percentage of people who get heart attacks is much higher in India than in the Western countries.
There has been a spate of high-profile heart attack victims such as comedian Raju Srivastava, singer KK, actor Puneet Rajkumar and TV star Siddharth Shukla, who were 40 or more. But the average age at which the first heart attack occurs in Indians has come down drastically, say doctors.
The overall prevalence of heart attacks below the age of 35 years is about 2 to 2.5%. It's not a very large number, but certainly this number is also an alarming number when you look at the age of the individual.
What we are getting in our emergencies are more younger people with heart attacks, and they actually come with massive heart attacks almost in late stages. They never reach early because of lack of awareness.
The lineage will tell you that if your parents had heart disease, the children will have double the chance.
Immigration to the United States has been a major source of population growth and cultural change through much of its history. In fact, nearly 28% of the population of the United States are immigrants. And this year, over 2.5 million illegal immigrants entered the United States. A majority of them are from the South American and Central American countries. But what's interesting is that over 800,000 of them, these illegal immigrants, are Chinese. Three startling figures there.
Absolutely.
It's the highest inflows of Chinese into the US. What's
Absolutely.
going on?
So if we were to look at historically, Sandeep, there has been illegal immigration happening from China. But what we're seeing now, especially since, let's say, the last 3 years in particular, there's been an upsurge in Chinese immigrants.
Right.
So this actually tells you something about what's going on in China, within the country, the challenges that people are facing. So to my mind, what's driving this influx of new Chinese immigrants into China is basically the fact that everyone is now looking at the economy slowing down.
Right.
And there is no sign of employment getting better. In fact, you will recall that the last data that came out for youth unemployment between 6 and 24 was about 21%.
21.
And then the Chinese government said, we're not going to put out any more data because it's too embarrassing for us.
And even the numbers going ahead, 2027, the data is like 4% GDP growth and all. Abysmal.
That's right. So China is, I think, looking at, after almost 40 years of explosive growth, is finally looking at maybe an extended period of slowdown.
Right.
And that is one of the triggers we're seeing this rise in number of Chinese illegal immigrants going into the US.
Right. And in fact, what does this mean for Xi Jinping? I mean, he's pitched China as the next superpower to rival the United States. It's going to overtake the United States. How can you do that when all your citizens are running away to, get into the US, especially the young population?
That's true. So as we know that China is an aging country, and their, one-child policy has made sure that the numbers aren't like what they needed to be, driving the economy and driving the growth engine. So that's one big challenge for China, but it's still a 1.4 billion, country. But I think for Xi Jinping particularly, Sandeep, this is deeply embarrassing.
Yes.
Loss
of face, as they call it.
Loss of face, because, like you said, I'm positioning myself as a new global hegemon. I'm the new superpower in the world.
Right.
And I'm challenging Joe Biden when I go meet him in San Francisco. So for him to say that, I still have people employing the run philosophy, literally running away from China, because they are unable to bear this a government which is persecuting, which is a police state in many ways.
Right.
And then to have this economy slowing down.
Yeah.
So it's like a double whammy for a lot of these people.
Right.
And Sandeep, I suspect the people who are leaving are not the poorest of the poor people in China.
Yeah.
My sense is the people who are leaving are basically people who made some money
Yeah.
from the economic boom that has happened over the past several decades.
Yeah.
And now they don't want their children to go through this system or face
Yes.
a downturn in the economy where they may be facing uncertainty in terms of employment
Right.
or their wealth going down. So they're taking this risk and saying that, okay, I'm going to go across to the US with whatever little money I have, because they are very sophisticated, Hawala system, you can say that, because it comes through New York, the Chinese Chinatowns and everything. So they are taking this chance and then going over to the US.
Right. And the interesting part is that the kind of trek that they have to go through, those, like you mentioned, the documentary, that they have to go through malaria-infested swamps.
Absolutely.
And, literally run through hoops to get into the United States. And the most interesting thing in that story, political freedom. A lot of them were talking about, we don't have political freedom. And now, the trade-off that Deng Xiaoping had made after Tiananmen was that, listen, I'm going to make you rich beyond your wildest dreams. Don't ask for political freedom. You think that time has come now? They have to start kind of loosening up a bit.
So that is the biggest challenge that Xi Jinping faces.
Yeah.
If the youth in China become restive
Yes.
and start questioning the legitimacy of the Communist Party,
Right.
I mean, that's the biggest threat to them. Right, so I think he wants to quell that at any cost. But this is a clear indication that there is a growing number of people in China who are unhappy with the economic situation, who would rather risk their lives trekking through 60 miles of this Darien Gap, through these mountains, rivers, and dense jungles where there's absolutely no help. If you fall, break your bone or something, there is no help that's going to come. In fact, more than 250 people have lost their lives, over the last 10 years just trying to cross this Darien Gap.
Darien Gap, absolutely. It's one of the most horrific crossings that anyone could attempt, and the fact that they're doing it suggests that they want to get in at any cost.
Absolutely, do or die.
So, Sri, you were in the United States for a number of months recently. How much of an issue, an election issue, is this in the United States now?
So, unfortunately, Sandeep, there has been a lot of anti-China sentiment. As unfortunate because it is playing out on the people there in the US, who are not to be blamed, and they are not like
they're just trying to make a good life for themselves.
So that's the unfortunate bit. But I think US has finally woken up to the fact that they have given China a free ride for far too long. Especially when it comes to intellectual property. They pretty much held themselves to whatever IP that was coming out of the US. All the factories that were set up in China, the local partner has merrily held themselves to those IPs. In fact, set up parallel factories. We had the case of a fake iPhone store, Apple store coming up, right next door to a legitimate one. So that's the extent to which China has actually taken this whole, US friendship to it's abused it in some sense. And US has now woken up saying, wait, this is it.
And it's now time to pay the bills.
Pay the bills, and now we're going to tighten the noose on your access to high-tech chips and everything, so you don't catch up with us.
Right. So, I mean, one of the, parameters for the attractiveness of a country is immigration, right? Everyone wants to run to the US because it's the #1 economy. And the rumors of the United States demise are greatly exaggerated. You think there'll be a time when the Americans are going to try and run into China as illegal immigrants?
Maybe not in our lifetime. I hope I'm right, but I don't see that happening, because ultimately, what people want, apart from, of course, a good living, is freedom. You cannot constantly live under a police state where every step is being watched on CCTV camera, whether you're, and there's a citizen score which decides your access to government services, whether you can actually live in a city or not, or whether you'll be sent back to your village. So that is a very dark kind of a government to live under.
So probably the Orwellian state, as George Orwell imagined.
It is an Orwellian state.
It is, and you can watch this story, The Great Chinese Exodus, only on the News9 Plus app. Do download and watch. Thank you, Sri. Over 52 years ago, the Indian Navy carried out one of the world's largest covert maritime wars. They did this in erstwhile East Pakistan. Now, over 400 specially trained Mukti Bahini naval commandos destroyed or disabled over 100,000 tons of shipping in erstwhile East Pakistan. It's one of the most amazing covert wars of the 20th century. These naval commandos attacked the lifelines of the Pakistan army that was carrying out a genocide against the Bengalis. Our story, Operation X, looks at this fascinating story behind this unusual military operation that helped create the new state of Bangladesh. You can watch this and more such stories only on the News9 Plus app. Download it from the App Store or the Play Store. Thanks for watching. In November 1971, 1 month before the Indo-Pakistan War, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi traveled to the US. She met President Nixon and his Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger. She was asked whether India had anything to do with the sinking of merchant ships inside East Pakistan. Prime Minister Gandhi flatly denied it. India has never acknowledged this operation until now. But there was this covert mission called Operation X. Here is its untold story.
News9 Plus. Download now.